DC Entertainment has just crossed 200,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel.
That's right, and to celebrate, we're throwing a massive party for ourselves, so we will see you later.
We are throwing a big party, but also for the fans, we are going to give you guys an exclusive look at the All-Star Batman 75 panel from WonderCon as a massive thank you to you.
Yes, thank you for subscribing.
First up, we have a gentleman who is arguably an icon like Batman in his own right. He was the illustrator of some of the most memorable Batman stories we have published, including All-Star Batman and Robin and the now legendary Batman Hush. His distinctive art style has influenced an entire generation of comic book artists and fans, and he's now the co-publisher of DC Comics, Mr. Jim Lee. Our next guest is the Senior Vice President of Creative Affairs for Warner Brothers Animation. Among the more recent DC Entertainment projects he has overseen are Young Justice, Green Lantern animated series, the wildly inventive DC Nation shorts, Beware the Batman, and Teen Titans Go. Please welcome Mr. Peter Girardi. Our next guest is a gentleman who is responsible for what I believe to be one of the most popular and influential iterations of Batman during these last 75 years. Beginning in 1992, his interpretation of the Dark Knight spanned 2 decades of Warner Brothers animated TV shows and movies. His amazing credits include Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited. Mr. Bruce Timm. Our next panelist has worked side by side with Mr. Timm during this amazing run, and he is quite simply, for all intents and purposes, the voice of Batman. Please welcome Mr. Kevin Conroy.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Our next guest once wore a Batman-styled cape and cowl in a movie. He is also a director, screenwriter, actor, author, host of the monthly podcast Fat Man on Batman, and a comic book writer. Please welcome Mr. Kevin Smith. And our final guest is well known to most of you who reside in the greater Los Angeles area from his voice work on KROQ's Kevin and the Bean Morning Show. He also hosts the Hollywood Babylon podcast with Mr. Smith and will be co-writing the Batman Green Hornet book coming later this year. With Kevin, please welcome Mr. Ralph Garman. So today, what we're going to try to do in the brief time that's been allotted to us, we have 75 years of Batman history to cover in about 40 minutes. So hang on to your seats. We're going to start off where we were 75 years ago. That is the cover to Detective Comics 27. Last big auction was in 2010. It sold for $1,075,000. So frankly, if you brought one of those with you today, you can come up here and do whatever you want to if you give it to me. And the next slide I want to show you shows a few more of those covers, and you can see that not only is Batman celebrating his anniversary, you'll see the world of Batman is something we all know more intimately than we would probably admit. From his sidekicks like Robin and Batgirl, and especially on the next slide, his villains, which I think in some ways are as indelible as anything that's happened. So let's go to our first general question, because it's the easiest way to start a discussion like this. Who is your favorite Batman villain, panelists, and why? And I'm going to start with Jim Lee.
Yes, I'm going to have to go with Catwoman, because, yes, she's a criminal. And in some ways, Batman, he's a vigilante too, so they both kind of share some common ground. But at the same time, he's a character that, obviously he's got to stop and can't for whatever reason. And then she knows it too. And I love the fact that she kind of plays with him just like he's a bauble or something like that. And they look good together too. So what can you say?
Peter?
Well, I think maybe 2 answers. One is I grew up on the Adam West and Burt Ward show, so I really like a lot of those crazy characters from that show. But then in the more canon, Two-Face for sure. I think we could all kind of relate. In the same way you relate to Catwoman, I think we could all kind of relate to Two-Face. So.
Yeah, I don't think I could actually narrow it down to just one, because I love them all for all various reasons. But if I had to, I would say Catwoman because Julie Newmar. That's it.
There are so many. I guess I have an unusual relationship with Mark Hamill, though. So I would have to say the Joker. And he brings out the best in me, and I bring out the worst in him. So we work well together.
I'm so pissed because Batman stole my answer. I'm going to go a bit more esoteric with the answer, though. Of course, there's a wonderful rogues gallery we can all choose from. But in terms of favorite villain, I'm gonna skew it a bit differently and say the favorite obstacle that Batman has to overcome, which could be a villain. It's his humanity. That's the only thing that stops him, and you see the frustration as he's portrayed throughout every medium. It's only when he hits the ceiling of his humanity that he can possibly be stopped, and as we've seen, even then, sometimes he overcomes it. So I'm going with Batman's humanity.
Well, crap. Anything I say now is going to sound lame. Like Bruce, because of the series, the Riddler for me always had a special place in my heart because Frank Gorshin's performance in that role was just indelible. He created that character for me. I always think of him that way.
Well, if it's one of my operating theses that every generation of America dates itself by where it comes to Batman, I think the age of our panel was just outed by the number of references to the next slide, which is Batman 66. The TV series that debuted then. First, for those that aren't aware, if you somehow missed the announcement that came from Conan O'Brien earlier this year, sometime late this year, this is going to appear on DVD and Blu-ray for the first time ever.
Finally.
We have been adapting Batman 66 for a little while now in digital series. We just collected it into its first hardcover, and we just found out on Wednesday that on April 27th, this book's going to debut on the New York Times list at number 2 in the hardcover graphic novel slot. Which I think speaks to the popularity of this iteration of Batman, but also the great job that our editorial team and our talent team doing Batman 66 has come together. Coming later this year is Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet, which Kevin and Ralph are writing. And gentlemen, there's no pressure on you now that you know the previous users of Batman 66 comics have become New York Times bestsellers. No one's expecting that from you. But I'm guessing, based on some of the answers I just heard and what I know, that that TV show was a real cultural moment for you guys especially. So how much of that do you want to bring, and how much do you want to try to give it your own spin when you do this, or do you want to say anything at all about what you're about to do?
Well, when Kevin and I started working on the book, we realized that there had been a strong template sort of given to us. I mean, there are certain characteristics of the show, certain aspects of the show that you have to sort of adhere to in order to make it feel like an episode of that show. So we had this great work that Lorenzo Semple and other writers had given via the series. And then as fans, you get to play what if. What would I have liked to have seen had there been other episodes, especially when it comes to the amazing crossover episode between Batman and the Green Hornet and Kato and Robin. Because Kevin and I were talking about how it was the first superhero crossover live action we had ever seen and what a big impact that made on us.
When you think about it, like, that was our Avengers when we were kids.
That's true.
Like, holy shit, 2 dudes in masks standing next to each other. For me, I think it was just kind of important to honor the Batman that brought us into the world of Batman. I was into Batman, of course, right around '89 when the movie came out. Prior to that, Frank Miller took him dark and stuff. Batman kind of returned to his more Dark Knight detective roots. And there was this general sentiment that if you grew up with the Batman, Adam West Batman, you kind of turned your back on it, man. The way like Peter denied Christ. Like, you just suddenly got to this place with the book where people were like, hey man, did you like that Batman, the old Batman? They're like, no man, I never watched that Batman. No man, that Batman's stupid, you know. And somewhere cock crows. So there was that period. I think the first person who set me straight, man, was Matt Wagner. The great Matt Wagner did Mage, and he also did for Batman a couple of Batman Grendels and a couple other books. And he had a line at one point where Batman was going to refer to Robin as well, little chum. And DC editorial at that point was like, don't do that. Don't, because people will remember that show. Don't do it. And so they made him take it out. And I was like, good thing, man, because who cares about that old Batman? That's your grandpa's Batman. And Matt Wagner was the first one who like stood up for that Batman. And he goes, you know what, man? Don't sell out on that Batman. That was your first Batman, so honor that Batman. And I was like, oh, Matt Wagner schooled me. And then from that point forward, I would go out to other people and when they would bag on Batman, I'd be like, man, you know what? You're a poser. You should honor that Batman.
But it is such a cool conceit, and I think especially the first couple promo images, the likenesses really give you
the covers by Alex Ross. They're just astounding. They're gorgeous. Even if you didn't like Batman 66, you look at these covers and you're like, I would like to own that cover. You could tell, like, you know, Alex is always consistently amazing, but you could tell the stuff that captures his imagination, totally. And you can tell that he loved Batman 66 because those covers are mind-bendingly good.
So we have one generation that's sort of captured in that late 60s moment, and then we get to the late 80s, and a couple of big explosions happen. And in 1986, Frank Miller hits with The Dark Knight Returns, probably up to that point the most shocking iteration of Batman that was ever there, and I think anyone who was a Batman fan or certainly a comic book reader was gobsmacked in the face when that came out. And I'm guessing that since you've been able to work with Frank on Batman after that, Jim, that's probably one of those moments when you first saw that book, you didn't imagine that's where your life was going to go.
Yeah, I was actually a senior in college when this book came out, and all I remember were those horrible Batman 66 cartoon shows or TV shows going, oh, I can't live with this. This is awful. Like, how am I going to think about a career in comics if that's what I have to live up to? And I was collecting comics. I still had comics mailed to my home, but I was really just unenthusiastically collecting them. And then this came out. It wasn't just that it was hand-colored. It wasn't just the fact that it was on shiny paper in a new format. The level of sophistication to the storytelling, the narrative, the political themes, the social themes, just blew me away. And then there's this scene where Batman, he's like 70, 75 years old, and he's naked and he's taking a shower. And it made me tingle in a weird way. You remember the scene, right? He had his mustache and he realizes he shaved it off. Like, oh snap. Like, it was the force of Batman. He thought he could drop the cowl, but it was deep inside him. And it was just very powerful and mythical. And it really got me inspired, that scene in particular, to get into comics. And so I put my first portfolio together in '87, got work shortly thereafter. So it was a life changer.
And I think the other thing that's important to remember is we love that phrase "Dark Knight" now, but this is when Batman went dark. And I don't think in pop culture he was really seen that much as a dark character. I mean, coming off the TV series, that wasn't a possibility at all. But this is where he first started getting cast that way, and that phrase had, today it's something that's used so handily, but it had a lot of resonance then because the dark part of that meant a lot. And I think that was what was fully at play in 1989 when we go to our next slide, and the next big cultural quake hit. Before I came in here today, I was telling somebody I was doing this panel, and without any prompting, they ran through the story. I remember the first time I saw a Michael Keaton Batman movie, and they went through a 10-minute exegesis about remembering specifically what night they saw it, how many people were in the theater, and it just, again, it was a great reiteration to me that everybody has those cultural moments. So I'm just curious if anybody on the panel can remember specifically when they saw that movie or what impact it had on them. Because I think also today we've seen so many different interpretations of Batman going on that it's tough to remember. It's tough to remember how impactful that was. Yes, Kevin.
I remember exactly where I was. I was working at Domino's. It was my first day of employment at Domino's Pizza, and I remember I was working for 2 hours, and they had 4 other trainees there. So about 2 hours into the shift, they realized they were overstaffed for the evening, and this was June 23rd, 1989. It's Friday night. So my friends were all going to see Batman at the Middletown Movie Theater in the big theater, theater number 1. And they were like, "We're going, man. You're gonna go." And this is a day before the internet, no smartphone, so I couldn't call my friend or anything like that unless I used a payphone, which I did, and I called him at his mother's house, and I was like, "You guys going?" And he's just like, "Yeah, we're gonna go." I was like, "Oh, buy me a ticket." He's going, "You're working." I was like, "I'm gonna quit." So 2 hours into the shift, the manager's just like, "We have too many people working on tonight, so who volunteers to go home?" And I was like, "I do." And he was like, "You can't, you're a trainee." And I was like, "Yeah, but I feel like you're right. There's far too many people here, and I'm happy to come train tomorrow. You could put me on the same time. I wouldn't even count this or anything like that. I just want to get a jump start on a real practice day, so tomorrow will be my first real day." And he was just like, "Okay, fair enough. Come back tomorrow, same time." So I left, and I got to the payphone just 1 block from a Domino's because I didn't want him to see me do this. And I called up my friend Brian at his parents' house, and I was just like, I'm coming. I'll meet you at the theater." And I met him at the theater. They had already bought my ticket. We went and sat dead center, man, perfect seats. I went with my friend Walter Flanagan, Brian Johnson, Walter Flanagan, 2 guys that are on Comic Book Men. Jason Mewes was with us as well. And so Walter was the guy that had handed me The Dark Knight Returns, got me back into comics. So watching that movie next to Walter, I swear to you, at one point when Batman first descends in the background, the 2 thugs are on the rooftop and they're having a discussion and whatnot, and you see in the background, deep background, Batman descends. This is what happens with me and Walter Flanagan. We're looking at the screen. We don't even make eye contact. We just Thelma and Louise it. We go.
I remember that one because my then wife was very pregnant with our soon-to-be son. And if we go to the next slide, this was this was my now 20-something-year-old son's Batman. And Bruce and Kevin, your guys' run here was so long and so strong. And at what point, if at all, did you realize how big this was going to be and how impactful this was going to be?
Well, you know, it's really weird because it was a different world back then. There was so fewer entertainment options because it was before the internet and before, you know, video games really took off and stuff. So it sounds really kind of oddly conceited, but I kind of knew the show was going to be a big hit, more because of how big Batman was in the public consciousness coming off of the first Tim Burton movie. Fortunately, it became, you know, not just a ratings hit, but a critical hit. I mean, we got a rave review in Entertainment Weekly, who don't normally review cartoons, but it was kind of beyond even what we were expecting.
I didn't have a clue. It was the first animated show I auditioned for.
Yeah.
The first one, the first role. Talk about getting the brass ring.
Yeah.
But we had been recording these things for months, you know, and Mark Hamill and I remember were both in the ADR room together at Warner Brothers the first day to do ADR. And on this full screen, that comes up, the lush color, the rich graphics, the full symphony score, just whoosh off the screen. And I looked at Mark, I said, "Did you have a clue that this is what we've been working on?" We both were just speechless. It was overwhelming. That's when I realized this was going to be a hot show.
As part of the 75th anniversary year, Warner Brothers Animation has created a couple of quick shorts. And Bruce, the first one you worked on and came back, it just debuted on the DC Nation block. And maybe you can give it a quick setup, and we want to show it for the people here so they can see it on the big screen.
Well, it's very short. A lot of you sound like you've already seen it, but it's 2 minutes long, and it's basically an itch that I've had for years, and I finally got to scratch it. I always kind of wanted to do a straight-up period piece version of Batman. It was set strictly in 1939, the year he was created. When I came up with that idea, I thought, well, then if I'm doing it in 1939, then it's got to be in black and white. So my buddy here, Peter Girardi, was in charge of the DC Nation shorts, so I hit him up with the idea, and he said, "That's great, do it."
I mean, it's not my money, it's Warner Brothers' money. I don't but, I mean, you know, the BTAS, what we call it internally, from the title sequence of BTAS, you can tell, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. There's the storytelling, there's the visuals, there's the way it's mixing together, there's the way it's forming, something that had never been done before. When we had a chance to do these DC Nation shorts, and Bruce had this idea, I mean, I wasn't going to say no, so.
Good. So you didn't say no, and this is the result. Video Meisters, do your magic.
You don't scare me! Stay back!
Is it over?
For now.
All right, we're going to stay in the animation world and jump ahead to 1999. Batman Beyond appears in another iteration that I think just defied everybody and challenged everybody's conceptions. And I'm curious, Bruce, do you remember where this idea came from?
I can tell you exactly. We were meeting with Jamie Kellner, who was the president of the Warner Brothers Network at the time. We had just started doing what we call the revamped Batman episodes. It was the New Adventures of Batman. He was like very complimentary on the new show. He really liked it a lot. He said, "But you know, we kind of want to do something a little different with Batman." And I went, "Uh-huh." And he said, "Yeah, I'm thinking teenage Batman." And I just kind of went, "Holy crap, really?" And I think also at the time, I think Buffy was like the WB's huge breakout hit at the time. So I think he was trying to like Buffyize Batman. So at first it was just kind of like, I don't even want to do this. This is going to be horrible. But then I was out in the parking lot talking with Paul Dini after the meeting, and I said, yeah, it's just, I don't know, this just seems so commercial and so not what we do. And then I said, but if Bruce Wayne got really, really old and he couldn't be Batman anymore, so this takes place in the future, and then he has to bring in like this kid to be the new Batman, the old warrior passing the torch onto the new guy and teaching him all his tricks. I thought, yeah, that might be something. And then the more we started talking about it, it just kind of grew. And then I mentioned it to Glenn Marikami, who was one of my co-producers on Batman, and I mentioned the idea to him, and the minute I said futuristic Batman, he said, that sounds great, let's do it. And so at that point, it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess this maybe it won't suck.
So does that mean, Kevin, that you get the call going, can you do an old Bruce Wayne voice? Did you have to practice an old voice?
They wanted me to do a really old Bruce Wayne, so I had to get him real gravelly.
So again, as part of Batman 75, we have another clip, and Peter, maybe you can talk about this one for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, once we decided to do the earliest animated kind of version of Batman that we had done with Bruce, of course, the next thing that Bruce and I talked about was, well, we should do a new Batman Beyond short to go with the early first Strange Days Batman. So we called Darwin Cook. Bruce did. Bruce and Darwin got back together. It was like getting the old band back together. And they came up with a great take, and I think you're going to see it now.
Ignition.
Sorry, pal, but you're history. Who sent that thing?
It didn't say. Whoever it was, they didn't stop at one.
Seven against two. Pretty bad odds.
For them.
Yeah! Batman Beyond fighting BTAS Batman.
So here we are in 2002, and DC Comics publishes Batman Hush by Jeff Loeb, drawn by Jim Lee. Did you understand what was going on when you and Jeff were creating this? Did you have any idea how transformative this was going to be?
No, not really. I mean, we just, I've been at DC for 3 years already and really hadn't done any monthly work, and I felt it was time to do something. And we knew that there'd be concerns with the schedule, so I ended up doing a lot of these issues in secret. I think only 3 people at DC knew that I was actually even working on this book. Jeff called me up and said, look, we should do a Batman story. That's the character that is most popular at DC. That's how you'll make your mark. And he said, what villain do you want to use? And I remember saying, well, I kind of like all of them, thinking he was just going to pick one, and it would be just like Batman versus the Joker or whoever. And maybe he misunderstood me. Maybe he's just sadistic. But he basically crafted a story was a new villain every single issue. It's interesting. From that last video we saw, which incorporated all the different elements of Batman, we wanted to really do a story that actually did tie into a lot of the stuff that you had seen before in different decades of Batman mythology. So to that point, he kind of starts out looking like Frank Miller's Batman with the shorter ears, and then with each successive issue, he kind of transforms more into a lither, more acrobatic Neil Adams Batman, and then there's like a shot with all the Batmobiles. And I think at the time, we didn't have the rights to do the 66 Batmobile, but I put it in there anyway. So if you see it, there's like the mortars I think are missing and some like little tweaks just to kind of fudge it a little bit, but that was, I had good reference, I knew what I was doing, so don't blame me. I think that book really introduced me to the fanaticism of Batman fans. When you get into comics as a professional, you see the loyalty and the passion of the fans, but then when you do a Batman project, it goes to a whole different secret, like, uber level. It really opened my eyes to the power of this mythology, of this character. And it's a character that I really love working on and look forward to doing more of.
To me, another watershed year comes in 2005 when you and Frank Miller begin working on All-Star Batman and Robin, coming out in an oversized Absolute edition this summer.
Right.
And I would call this a fairly tumultuous production.
Yeah. When it came out, it was actually, a lot of people didn't like it on the internet. They were, that's not my Batman. And I would say at least 2 different people at DC almost got fired over this book. There was an issue which had blacked out bars. I don't know if you guys are familiar. There was like a lot of salty language in the black bars, but the printer made an error and you could actually see the words underneath the black bars for some reason. They decided that it was important to have the real words underneath the black bar instead of just putting a black bar. And so those are collector's issues. I sell one about every week on eBay, so if you look for the auction, you can find it. But what's funny, and I think is real proof and testament to the power of Batman, is that as crazy as that storyline was, and the quote, "I'm the goddamn Batman," it is now part of the vernacular, it's now part of the mythology, and it really shows you, for as human as the character is, he is bulletproof in all these different ways that you can tell a crazy story where he's Zebra Batman and he goes to the moon in the 50s, and you could do a story where he's very dark in the Arkham games and in the Dark Knight movie, and it still works, and he's multi-generational and appeals to little kids and older fans, and it just goes to show you that all this stuff basically goes into a giant creative pool, and you guys as the fans decide what's important, what works, and you are in that way shaping who Batman becomes. That's it.
But also that year, Christopher Nolan launched his global phenomenon that is the Batman trilogy. I think these are the apotheosis of superhero movies. I think these movies are actual art made from a story about a guy wearing a mask. And I'm just curious, for everyone on the group or whoever wants to answer it, where do you think it goes next? Where do you think the Batman storytelling goes?
The technology has definitely caught up with the mythology. You can now have a car, or you can now have a phone in your car, as was portended in the Batman 66 TV show. So, I don't know. To me, I think there's going to be a broadening of the Batman family. You're going to see more diversification of that, and I think the technology is going to basically make all his toys even cooler as it go forward in time.
But it's also the humanity of the character, I think, that's made him so resonant for so long. You know, he's mortal. He doesn't have any superpowers, and he's got such an incredible moral compass. He always does the right thing. That's what's made him last so many years.
Well, you know, one thing that's interesting is that I think all of this stuff is cyclical. If you go back, you know, Batman started off really dark, then he got really silly with Adam West, then he got gradually darker and darker through the Neil Adams years and through Frank Miller and then the Tim Burton thing in my show, and then it ebbs and flows. I was meeting with our boss Sam Register, and he said, what do you think we should do next with Batman? Just picking my brain, and I said, well, I think we've kind of done like this dark, serious Batman for 10, 15 years now. I think we need to go back the opposite way and embrace the childlike, aspects of the character that people like when they were really little. So that's how they ended up doing, Batman Brave and the Bold, which I think is just as valid a show in its own weird way as any of the stuff we do. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with the movies now. I mean, it's like, I'm actually really looking forward to seeing Ben Affleck play Batman, because I think it's going to be a completely different take on the character. And as we found, is when you team him up with Superman, it's a whole different world. It's like, it's not suddenly the world that's like all bound by, supposed, hard science and physics. It's like, that's, you open up the door, it's the willy-nilly box. You can end up, going to the moon if you want, so.
So we end here in the present day, and we have the current iteration of Batman. This is the #1 monthly comic book in America. It has been since it launched almost 3 years ago. Every collected edition becomes a #1 New York Times bestseller in hardcover and in paperback. He's never probably ever been stronger critically and commercially in comic form. Coming this fall, we will be putting out a book and mask set based on the 3rd volume in their trilogy. It's an actual Joker mask mirroring his shaved off face that you can put on and wear and do God knows what with when you do that. So we have that, and then the newest world that Batman has conquered. Massively popular series of Arkham Asylum games, the 3rd version of which is due shortly. And perhaps the best place to end this is the last, most recent iteration we have seen of Batman. Thank you, Adam Phillips in the back of the room. My panelists, I thank you so much for probably one of the best hours I've ever spent working at DC Entertainment. I would love to do it again. Thanks all of you for coming today. Thank you so much.
It's Batman's 75th anniversary, so we are going to be celebrating all year long because that's what you do for an anniversary, right?
True.
Well, we've got exclusive news, insider tidbits, and updates for you all year long.
Yeah, so you guys should subscribe right now because you don't want to miss that right now.
It's true.